Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Rubber Sports Show and the Pro Wrestling March Madness. As y'all seen on the preview video, I did a March Madness bracket with current professional wrestlers. I'm going to review the play-in games and the round of 64 and the round of 32 and set up the Sweet 16. In the play-in games, playing matches, for the West region, we had Kenny Omega versus Homicide. For the Midwest region, which the winner of that was Kenny Omega. For the Midwest region, we have Xavier Woods versus Ultimo Dragon, the winner Ultimo Dragon. For the East, we had Hernandez versus Thaddeus Thomas. We had Hernandez winning that. And for the South, we had Drew Galloway versus Shelton Benjamin, and the winner was Drew Galloway. So what I did was each region, the West, East, Midwest, South, I ranked the wrestlers. So whatever team won that matchup, so like the 116, whoever won that, that's who won the match. Obviously, as we all know, in the first round of the round of 64 in the NCAA tournament, there was some upsets. So obviously, the upsets translated here. I'm going to run through each region and get to the final four for each region, which will make up the Sweet 16. We had the 1-16 Daniel Bryan versus Kenny Omega. Daniel Bryan won. We had the 8-9 of Eddie Edwards and Mr. Anderson. Eddie Edwards, the 8 seed, moved on. We had the 5-12 matchup of Kevin Owens and Stardust. The 5 moved on to Kevin Owens. The 4-13 was Dean Ambrose and Mark Briscoe. Dean Ambrose moved on. The 6-11 was Luke Harper and Bobby Fish. Luke Harper moved on. The first upset, we had the 3-14. We had Seth Rollins versus Kata Ibushi, and Kata Ibushi moved on. We had the 7-10 of Jay Briscoe and Kofi Kingston, and 10 seed of Kofi Kingston moved on. Then we had Kazuchika Okada versus Marufuji, Naomichi Marufuji, or Naomichi, whatever how you quite pronounce that. I'm not really good at pronouncing the Japanese names. A lot of great Japanese wrestlers, but not great at pronouncing their names. So it led to the round of 32 for the West Division, was the 1-8, Daniel Bryan and Eddie Edwards. Daniel Bryan moved on. The next matchup was the 4-5, Dean Ambrose versus Kevin Owens. The 4 seed Dean Ambrose moved on. The next we had the 6 seed of Luke Harper versus the 14 seed of Kota Ibushi, and the 6 seed moved on from Luke Harper. Next we had the 10 versus 2. We had Kofi Kingston versus Okada, whatever, Okado, yeah, I quite how to pronounce that. He moved on, the 2 seed. So that set up a sweet 16 of Kazuchika Okada versus Luke Harper, and then Dean Ambrose versus Daniel Bryan. The Midwest region, we had 1-16 of Randy Orton and Ultimo Dragon. Randy Orton moved on. The 8-9 was James Storm and Dolph Ziggler. James Storm moved on. The 5-12 was Finn Balor and Yoji Nagata. Finn Balor moved on. The 4-13 was Sheamus and Kenny King. Sheamus moved on. The 6-11 was Jay Lethal and Jack Swagger. The 6 seed of Jay Lethal moved on. The 3-14 was Cesaro and Abyss. Cesaro moved on. The 7-10 is Adrian Neville and Kyle O'Reilly. The 7 seed of Adrian Neville moved on. The 2-15 was Bray Wyatt versus Tomohashi Ishii, and Bray Wyatt moved on. So the round of 32, we had Randy Orton versus James Storm. Randy Orton moving on. We had an upset here, the 4-5, which was Sheamus and Finn Balor. The 5th seed Finn Balor won and moved on. Next, we had Cesaro versus Jay Lethal, the 3-6. The 3 seed Cesaro moved on. Then we had Bray Wyatt versus Adrian Neville, the 2-7, with an upset. We had the 7 seed of Adrian Neville move on. So the Sweet 16 out of the Midwest region, we have Randy Orton versus Finn Balor, and then Cesaro versus Adrian Neville. In the East region, the 1-16 was John Cena versus Hernandez. John Cena moving on. The 8-9 was Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho. Kurt Angle moving on. The 5-12 was Samoa Joe and Kazarian. Samoa Joe moving on. The 4-13 was Alberto El Patron versus MVP. Alberto El Patron moving on. The 6-11 was Bobby Roode versus Takahashi Morishima. Takehishi Morishima, the 11th seed, moved on. The 314 was Michael Elgin and Alex Shelley. Michael Elgin moving on. The 710 was Chris Hero at 10 seed versus the 7 seed of Chris Sabin. The 7 seed of Sabin moved on. The 215 was Adam Cole and Low Key. Adam Cole moving on. The round 32 was John Cena versus Kurt Angle. And the upset, the 8 upset the 1, so we have Kurt Angle moving on. The 4-5 was Alberto El Patron versus Samoa Joe. Alberto El Patron, the 4 seed, moving on. Next, we had the 3 seed of Michael Elgin versus the 11 seed of Morishima. And we had Michael Elgin moving on. And the 2-7 was the 7 seed of Chris Sabin versus the 2 seed of Adam Cole. We had an upset. We had the 7 seed Chris Sabin moving on. So the Sweet 16 for the East region is Kurt Angle versus Alberto El Patron. Michael Elgin versus Chris Sabin. And finally, the South region. We had the 116 of AJ Styles and Drew Galloway. AJ Styles moving on. The 8-9 was Davey Richards versus Roderick Strong. Davey Richards moving on. The 5-12 was Hideo Itami versus Curtis Axel. Hideo Itami moving on. The 4-13 was Austin Aries and Damian Sandow. Austin Aries moving on. The 6-11 was Wade Barrett and Christopher Daniels. The upset of the 11th seed Christopher Daniels moving on. The 3-14 was Shinzuki Nakamura versus Tyson Kidd. The 14th seed of Tyson Kidd moving on. The 7-10 was Sami Zayn and Carl Anderson. Sami Zayn moving on. And then the 2-15 was Hiroshi Tanahashi versus ACH. And the 2 seed of Tanahashi moving on. So the Sweet 6 for the round of 32, we had AJ Styles versus Davey Richards. AJ Styles moved on. The next to the 4-5, we had the 4 seed of Austin Aries versus the 5 seed of Hideo Itami. We had the 5 seed upset moving on. Next, we had the 11 seed of Christopher Daniels versus the 14 seed of Tyson Kidd. The 11 seed of Christopher Daniels moved on. The next, we had the 7 Sami Zayn versus 2 Hishiro Tanahashi. We had Hishiro Tanahashi moving on. So the Sweet 16 out of the South is AJ Styles, Hideo Itami, Christopher Daniels, and Hiroshi Tanahashi. So that will be the Sweet 16 for the Pro Wrestling March Madness. After the Sweet 16, Thursday, Friday, I will get a video up for the Elite 8 and then the Final 4. And I'll check out Robert Sports Show 5 for your NCAA March Madness preview of the Sweet 16. And stay tuned to Robert Sports Show Pro Wrestling for WrestleMania preview and WrestleMania review. As always, thanks for watching. Have a spiffy night. Robert Sports Show, the YouTube leader in sports channels.